I was lucky enough to see The Matrix on opening night way back in 1999, and I still remember the moment that I knew it was going to be a special film. Believe it or not, it was right from the start. The Warner Brothers logo, which had this cool cyberpunk treatment. But it wasn't the visuals that surprised me, it was this music. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but this music gave me a really unsettled feeling, unlike any I'd ever gotten from a film score. And this is the closest thing The Matrix has to theme music, being the most distinctly recognizable musical signature in the film. So in this video, I want to explore that musical theme, what it is, why it sounds the way it does, and how it helps to tell Neo's story. So let's find out how deep the rabbit hole goes on the art of storytelling. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix chord is. You have to hear it for yourself. Now, granted, on this dinky little piano, it doesn't have the same effect, but you can hear the basic musical concept here. What you're hearing is two very simple chords which alternate back and forth. In the actual film, these chords are orchestrated with swelling horns and trumpets. Now, without getting too deep into music theory, there's something interesting about these two particular chords and the way they're put together. By the way, a chord is just any combination of 3 or more notes, and the chords you're hearing in The Matrix are about as simple as they get. Now, weirdly, the second chord actually has 2 of the same notes as the first chord, so they're closely related chords. And in fact, if you were to just overlap them on the same spot on the keyboard, you'd just get one 4-note chord. And the weird thing is that when these two chords are played close together, it sounds rather pleasant. It doesn't sound tense or unnerving. It's only when the chords are played with some distance between them that they attain that effect. This is sometimes called a polychord, and it's a pretty useful tool in musical storytelling, especially when you want to communicate a sense of crossing from one world into another world. A classic example comes from John Williams' score of A New Hope. The very last shot of the opening act shows C-3PO and R2-D2 in an escape pod headed to Tatooine. It's an important moment in which we, the viewer, cross the threshold into the world of adventure. See if you can hear the alternating chords. And here they are, just played separately. Again, these chords are not especially compatible, and that's why the effect works the way it does. Obviously, the musical score of a movie or a play has a huge responsibility. Music provides so much of the story's emotional context that you just can't imagine that story being told without that music. But I think there's also another deeper kind of influence that music has on our experience of a story, one that isn't strictly emotional. Instead of merely producing a feeling, it also instills an idea in the mind of the viewer, often subconsciously. Some film scores manage to capture the themes of the story rather than just the mood of the film or the tension in a particular scene. The score for The Matrix was composed by Don Davis, and he was fascinated by the dual reality of The Matrix, the fantasy world created by the machines, and the real world in which people are being hunted by robot squids in underground sewers. The idea of two somewhat clashing chords was inspired by that duality. Let's remember that for the first 30 minutes or so of the film, neither Neo nor the viewer knows that he's living in a false reality. But one of the things the Wachowskis did so effectively was to suggest, through subtle filmmaking techniques, that something is slightly wrong with the world that Thomas Anderson inhabits. As the opening events of the film unfold, we're given plenty of clues that something is off. And I don't just mean the leather-clad superhumans doing crane kicks or jumping across buildings. I'm talking about the more subtle clues, the perspective of the camera giving you the feeling that Thomas Anderson is being watched, the suggestion that he might be hallucinating or dreaming, and the fact that events seem somehow to be predetermined. This is finally spelled out when Morpheus tells him that he knows there's something wrong with the world which he can't explain, like a splinter in his mind. Sort of like something you're seeing or hearing, but not quite able to articulate or explain. The point is that for this section of the film, this kind of noir mystery, the boundaries between the real world and the fantasy world are not yet clarified. And it's that very subtle dissonance in the viewer's perception of Thomas Anderson's world that Davis was aiming to capture musically. This gets even more interesting when you realize that the chords, and more importantly, the relationship between those two chords, changes as the story develops. The shot of Trinity jumping across the buildings in the film's introduction was actually Davis's inspiration for this polychord idea. And in that case, the two chords you hear are actually quite dissonant. And at the film's climax, when Trinity confesses that she loves Neo, proving that he is the one and bringing him back from the brink of death, we get these chords.
Now get up.
Notice the interesting tension that is created by overlapping these chords. And in case you weren't convinced, listen to what the music does immediately after Neo kills Agent Smith and realizes that he is indeed the one. That's right, no more dissonant polychord, it's just one chord, which makes sense because the dissonance in Neo's character, his doubt in himself and his uncertainty that he is the chosen one is at this moment resolved. So it's kind of fun to rewatch this movie and just listen for those little musical moments which occur really throughout the film. And it's a really fine example of how music really does influence our perceptions in ways that we're often not conscious of and that go even deeper than emotion. So there you have it. Please subscribe if you enjoy nerding out on this sort of thing, and I'll see you on the next one.